Here's Jim.
And I'm Argal.
All right. We have a new episode today, and we are talking about the impact of law enforcement in tribalization of America. It has been a whirlwind topic really for over a year now, and now it has circled around to tribes that we didn't really think that they jump on the bandwagon on kind of let's get rid of the law around here.
All of a sudden, right?
All of a sudden, it's a popular theme, and they're not even giving any credit to the other tribes.
No, they're taking all the credit for that one. That's right.
This is an original idea. So we have this law enforcement conversation going on right now because of high profile search warrants and other things that are going on with seizing phones and God knows who the hell wants law involved in their environment. So why do you think that there is a common enemy right now between many tribes, but those tribes have no interest in banding together against their common enemy?
Yeah, it's obvious because they dislike law enforcement for two totally separate reasons, right? I mean, from one tribe's perspective, and I think I belong to that tribe, right? I am, I don't believe we should defund the police. I think the real conversation, and it's a real conversation, is, how do we effectively use those resources and send in people to different situations that can de-escalate a situation as opposed to escalate it. But the reality of it is, the reason why it happens for most people of my persuasion is because we all know that police departments were created to stop runaway slaves. That's where the whole idea of policing started. That's what most historians think. And so those slave patrols eventually became police officers. There's not a long stretch from officer to overseer, right? And so from my perspective, it's like, if I got a cop behind me and he whirls on me, I am very nervous because I could conceivably get shot for having a busted taillight. But the other side, it looks at it as, trying to silence their great leader, right? Which is ludicrous.
Lord and Savior.
They're right, exactly. Like, and so it's just funny. Like, I had a conversation with somebody today, and they were like, this particular person's dad, is a huge supporter of, we'll call him Voldemort. Is that the guy in Harry Potter whose name you're not supposed to say? They're a huge supporter of Voldemort.
I know you would know. I wouldn't know. So you might as well be talking about Star Wars.
Exactly. So that guy whose name we won't say, they were like, well, this is the first time in the history of our country that they've gone after a president. And I was like, yeah, it's also the first time in the history of our country that the president stole confidential, documents from the White House. So he was the first, and then they're doing their first because what he did was illegal. So
when I was growing up, when I was in high school, I should say, you could tell who wanted to go in law enforcement, and you can tell by my next statement that I went to school in a very rural area. It was the guys who like to drive fast and carry guns.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was kind of a joke, but the thing about it is there are a lot of people in law enforcement, right? Yeah. Just sheer numbers. Yeah. They're dwindling every day, and we can talk about that, but there's sheer numbers, and you're not going to have 100% of idyllic people with the focus of what they're supposed to do serve and protect when you have a large population. The bell curve says it's impossible,
Right. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you want to weed out the people who are not in bounds on that protect and serve. And across the board, I can see that, you would want to be truthful about, hey, these guys are spectacular. They pull babies out of cars. They did this. They do that. And then the other ones, you want to be equally as vocal. Hey, they pulled the black man out of the car and shot him because he didn't, he lifted his left arm too fast.
Right. Yeah.
And then the same scenario goes on at the federal level, that people are, serve and protect. They're finding child molesters, child pornographers, all of that, specifically the FBI. I don't know if you are friends with any FBI agents, but I know a couple, and they could not be the most salt of the earth, willing to make sure our country's safe type of people. And when you project, and this happens on both sides too, both sides of the argument of, overreaching because of race and profiling, and overreaching because they have strong authority and they're doing it. You have to be very careful on making sure you have all the evidence prior to making the judgment. And specifically, body cameras, I think, have been an incredible asset to trying to level the field, because even I have, in my college years, been a target where cops took my beer because I was underage and no ticket. They just took my stuff and they're gonna have a party later. And that wouldn't happen anymore with body cameras.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then on the other side, you have the federal side. That is a long process. You're going to start throwing stones on day one. You got a problem. You got to let these professionals do their job until they've proven, or shown, I shouldn't say proven, they've shown with evidence that they haven't done their job properly. And there, in the near term, there has been no evidence of that. They haven't followed anything that's been inappropriate across the board. They're treating it like they would any other situation, but everybody's saying, but this isn't every other situation. It should be treated differently. But the last time I saw the statue of justice, it was with a blindfold on.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You can't, I mean, it kind of speaks to the hypocrisy of that whole tribe. I mean,
but how do they justify that?
Because they are completely okay with being hypocrites. Like, that's the reality of it. I think they're completely okay with being hypocritical. They will support whatever they want to support when it best suits their needs. If it doesn't suit their needs, they don't support it. I mean,
but that completely hurts my argument of that tribes are justified by, they don't think it's fair. And then they say that, this isn't fair, and that's what's galvanizing them. And now you're blowing me out of the water with that.
But I'm agreeing with you. They don't think it's fair. But that's my point. They don't think it's fair because in this case, it's not fair. It's completely fair for them to drag me out of they believe it's completely okay for them to drag me out of my car and treat me a certain way and potentially harm me because I looked suspicious. That's completely fair, right? It's completely fair that in the case of their illustrious savior, that despite the fact that he may have broken the law, it's completely fair that nothing happens to him because he puts America first, and he's always right. And that, so it's a warped sense of fairness, but
I'm so happy you said that. Now I feel better.
but that's exactly what it is. I mean, because
I completely agree with you, but I didn't think of it.
but that's what's going on. I mean, they legit, let's be real about it. Some guy lost his life over the weekend because Trump, I'm sorry, not Trump, Donald Duck has been, am I supposed to say his name? Because someone said that they were being unfairly targeted by a corrupt FBI. And one of his supporters hopped in his car and drove to the FBI offices and tried to shoot FBI agents with a nail gun, right?
I did see that.
And so
trained law enforcement, not just regular law enforcement, but they hyper trained law enforcement.
Right.
You're going to come at them with a nail gun and see how that goes.
Right. So there are 2 points there. The first point is that guy genuinely believes that the FBI is crooked based on what his tribe is telling him, because it's impossible for their leader to have done anything wrong. So that tribe totally believes that it's got to be the FBI. And you know what? I'm going to stop him, right? And so he goes down there. So that's the first point, right? The second point is when you look at law enforcement and how they engage with different tribes, this guy drove to the FBI office, shot at them with a nail gun, drove off, and ended up in a several hour-long standoff at an intersection with them before they finally shot him, or he shot himself and they shot, whatever. Do you know that if you can shoot at the FBI and then drive away and then get into a several hour-long standoff, you can only do that as a white person in America? Can you imagine if I drove up to the FBI building and shot at the building and drove? I wouldn't make 2 blocks.
Here's what makes that point worse. Anytime you hear of that type of incident happening, I know it's a white guy.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, oh boy.
No. I don't know how many African Americans are going to intentionally drive anywhere near law enforcement. I don't like passing by the police station even. It's just how it is, right? Seriously, I don't. I honestly, and look, I drive a German sports car, and I wear a tie every day, but I still don't like seeing police officers. And it's because most people don't know this. When I was in the 8th grade, my brother was an attorney for, I think, the AFL-CIO at the time. He's a big union guy, and he used to travel around the state of Indiana doing presentations and union rallies and things like that on behalf of the AFL-CIO. We worked for AFL-CIO at one point. He worked for AFSCME. Anyway, when I was in the 8th grade, he sat us down, my mother and I, and he said, Mom, Eric, Argyle, I just want you to know that I drive into some places that I've been told I'm not welcome. And if something happens to me and they say that I pulled a gun or something along those lines, I don't own a gun. And I was in the 8th grade. I had no clue what he was talking about. Because I didn't know. I was just like, big brother's tripping. Like, what is he talking about, right? But now that I'm an adult and I've seen the history, I understand exactly what he was talking about. And he said there were places where they looked at him and said, we don't like your kind around here. And so you need to be out before nightfall. You need to be out of town before nightfall. And so there's a very different interaction. The law enforcement has a very different interaction with different tribes. And that's just the reality of it. Like, it is what it is.
Since your brother was, doing that for the AFL-CIO.
Yep.
So that was what, in the 30s? So, kind of trying to see.
It was actually the early 80s, okay?
Oh, people still supported unions then? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, his most recent gig was for AFTRA, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, and he would have to negotiate with like studios. And at one point, the studio, when he was negotiating with Paramount Studios, and they were like, "You're on the wrong side. You need to come over here," right? And so, they met him for lunch. They wrote a number on a piece of paper, slid it to him, that whole thing. And he was like, "Okay, forget the unions." And so he went and joined Paramount Studios, right? Completely forgot all of his union stuff. And I swear to you, he wasn't there a year before he was like, "I can't." He was like, "Eric, Argyle." He's like, "Argyle, they keep they want me to work at 7:00, right? Because when you're in the union, you know what you do. At 4:59, you're like, I'm out of here, right? I'm completely out of here.
They do have a great sense of work-life balance.
Yeah, right, exactly. So to make a long story short, the free movies we used to get, that ride's over because he left Paramount Studios because he did not want to be on his phone all night. So
I can certainly appreciate that. As you well know, I'm a big
Yeah.
work-life balance person.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. You are. I was reading a book by Chris Hayes. It's called A Colony in a Nation, and it talks about, he calls them colonies, but now that I think about it, it's really tribes. He's talking about how there are different colonies in America that have a different life experience, and he was talking about his experience with the book. Starts literally, the first page is about the police, because largely he wrote this book, I think, after Ferguson, right?
Oh, okay.
And he really dove into that whole thing. But he talked about how when he was in college, he went to the Republican National Convention. His girlfriend, who eventually became his wife, was covering it as a reporter, the Republican National Convention in Philadelphia. And as he gets to the security gate, he realizes he's got an eyeglass case in his bag that has weed in it.
Okay.
And he's like, uh-oh. And so he goes through the metal detector, fine. He's like, I made it. Then he goes around the corner, and there's another group of police officers rummaging through bags, just like going through bags, right? And he's like, uh-oh, I'm going to be in trouble, right? And so they pull open his bag. They pull open the case where his the zipper where his eyeglass case was. They look in the eyeglass case, and yep, there is some weed. And he's like, and he leans over to his girlfriend. He's like, I think they just found the weed in my bag, right? And he said the police officers are talking, and they kind of huddle. And he turns to his father-in-law, future father-in-law. He's like, I think they just found weed in my bag, right? And he's panicked because he's like, I'm going to jail. Right?
Yeah.
And then he thinks, I'm going to run, right? Because I think I can get out of here. They're not going to chase me. But he's like, that's stupid because they have my bag, whatever. So the cops look at him, put his stuff back together, and put the bag on the table and don't say anything, as if to say, just pick it up and go. And so he picks it up and he goes. And he said he realized that day that there are different experiences with certain tribes and other tribes, because, like I said, if that had been me trying to sneak weed into the Republican National Convention, I'm pretty sure I would have gone to jail. Like it's just the way that it is, right? So,
well, and I completely agree with how, we've talked in the past about information sources and how that galvanizes tribes in America, and the problem with that. I don't know if there's actually a more stronger topic for galvanizing and solidifying tribes in this country than law enforcement.
yeah.
And Yeah, it's just that simple. I mean, there's a lot of arguments on all facets of it that contribute or support that. Now, with all that said, what about the law enforcement tribe? There
Oh,
is a tribe that is losing members hand over fist because of the the perception and the lack of respect they get on a daily basis when there was a wave, I think, that came in, and you they did a great job of marketing to individuals that were interested in fixing the system.
yeah.
And in some cities and counties and all kinds of places, they had some success recruiting those type of people into the system.
Yeah.
And specifically, I'll point to New York, which has been really, really reeling with just a lack of respect at a ground level to officers, that a number of them are trying to police or straighten out or makes more safe the communities they grew up in, but with the lack of accountability that's going on for people that throw I would say it's considered minor offenses, but it's offenses against the cops, that they're literally now having people leave the force in droves.
Yeah.
But so you're leaving the people likely not that you want to have in that situation. And I don't want to go on too many tangents, but it also parallels a lot about politics.
Politics. That's exactly when you said that. That's exactly what I thought. Because
But let's
yeah,
stay focused on the law enforcement side of
yeah,
it. So where does the tide turn for tribes to support the the ideology of law enforcement, and then does that follow by people that enforce the ideology, or do you have to wait till you have people that come from the tribes that find law enforcement not contributing to their standard of life or their pursuit of happiness or their truth, to step up and join the force?
yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think I think it's interesting that the decline in the number of people who want to be police officers happens to coincide with the increase in the number of body cameras we have in this country. So, the accountability thing is something that I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable about. So it's not only, I mean, it's a lack of respect thing, but the lack of respect is coming from the fact that we have all of this evidence now that they can be their own gang, right? I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah.
It's the blue flu and all of that stuff that we know that they're famous for. So I don't know what the answer is. I think it's a multi-layered problem. You know, we make up 4% of the United States population in the United States, but we make up 25% of the incarcerated people in the world. Like
We do.
1 in 4 people in the world are incarcerated right here in the United States. Like that's a travesty. And so part of it is this police state that we've created, which speaks more to the criminal justice system than it does to the police. And the police are down funnel from this criminal justice system that we created that probably causes them to behave the way that they do. I mean, when the laws say that a certain group or groups of people are less than important, and then the police are brought along to enforce those laws, then you can't expect them to think any differently than the laws they enforce. And so maybe the only way to fix this problem is to actually start to look at some form of criminal justice reform, like just, the whole, you've heard the one about how,
No,
you know,
that's you bring an excellent point to the table, because we have been discussing law enforcement almost too narrow in the actual people that are the face of it from a ground level.
yeah,
And you're right, it's the entire system, though. It's considered law enforcement.
yeah.
And yeah, no, that's an excellent point.
I mean, I don't, sometimes I have a tendency to lean a little bit slightly to the left, but you know,
You can't be.
um,
You're sitting on the right.
yeah. Do you want me? I can run to your house and you can run to my house and we can switch. But most people don't know that the Nixon administration, I want to say 78, but I could be wrong.
No,
That
they were out long before 78.
73, 72,
There
77.
you go.
Yeah, there
There.
it is. But the Nixon administration, um, yeah, I don't even, yeah, I forget birth dates too. So for the record, but anyway, so the Nixon administration had a policy that was designed to lock up black and brown people and white people that they deemed as hippies, right?
Hmm.
Because they thought that black and brown people and white hippies were more inclined to vote Democrat. And so they created the whole war against drugs, um, the laws around the war against drugs to lock up black and brown people and white hippies, because they wanted to make sure that they weren't able to vote Democrat, right? And it is a legitimate policy. Anybody wants to Google it, just Google Nixon administration's policy to lock up black and brown people and hippies, and a whole string of articles that come up from the newspapers who reported on that. And so when you think about it, this problem started decades ago, right? And so
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
that was the first thing, and then I mean, we won't go back to the whole Jim Crow laws, but yeah, hell, let's go back to the whole constitution. Like right in the United States Constitution, if you look at when they emancipated slaves, right there in the 13th Amendment, it says that no person will be enslaved in this country, except if you basically commit a crime and then you become property of the state, then it's okay for us to enslave you, right? And it's in the Constitution, but most people don't read it that way, right? That's in the amendment that freed the slaves. Like, we'll let you be free, and there be no slavery in this country unless you commit a crime. And if you commit a crime, then you can become a slave or property of the state. And so they passed the amendment, but then they put all these laws making sure that they locked up all the people who were black and brown after that, to make sure that they continued to have, indentured servitude in our country. And that system has continued to this very day. So if you look at, the number, the prison population now, there are a large number of African Americans and Hispanics in prison, and they're all doing work for corporations inside those prison walls and making products, inside those prison walls, and those companies are paying pennies on the dollar. So this whole problem is a giant potpourri of
We're gonna have to topic that next. Penal system and tribes, because you are going down the penal system. I could do an equal argument on how colleges use their students for slave labor.
You're not going to get an argument from me. Not only are they using they're using the students for slave labor, but we end up paying for it.
Right.
Like that's the reality of it. Absolutely.
But we'll start off with the penal system, because slave labor is kind of a violent term. I won't go that far again, but it's a tongue in cheek, definitely utilizing free labor
Right.
Well, not even free labor. You're paying them so you can labor for them
Right.
and they profit off of you.
Right. Yeah.
But we will, I think that's a great topic for the next episode because it really has, I think, a lot to do with tribes that come out of people who've experienced that type of, well, either, deservedly so in incarceration or didn't deserve it. And if you come out, it's a very different society
Yeah.
than if you didn't get put into the penal system.
Yeah. 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 And part of that, is also looking at, you know, the laws created to impact different tribes. I mean, the cocaine laws in this country, if you sell crack, which is a street level drug. So for, I mean, I don't know the price, but I'm pretty sure you can buy crack for, $5 or $10. Maybe you can buy crack it for $10, right? And that's a very low level, street level thing, usually done by poor folk, right? Largely, in inner cities, black and brown people, but it's a poor person sell, right?
Yeah,
But
I don't know if it's exclusively inner city, but I would definitely agree with the economic profile.
right. But at the high, but you can't have crack unless you have coke, right? And you burn the coke down to create the crack. But the crimes for coke possession are vastly different and more lenient than the crimes for street level drugs. And
That's
so,
just working the system. You know,
but the point is that lawmakers decided we're not going to punish these guys as much as we're going to punish these guys, which gets back to my whole point. I'm not surprised that police officers treat certain tribes differently because the laws are created to treat certain tribes differently. So
yeah, and I think that definitely has an effect on the structure and division of tribes.
yeah, yeah,
But it's still interesting now. We have pretty diverse tribes saying, hey, why don't we stop giving these people money?
right, right. You know what? It's funny because growing up, I think I at a certain point wanted to be a cop, right? Because growing up, Starsky and Hutch was on TV, and I
Yeah.
thought they were cool. And I got my shirt actually looks like the Torino, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be a cop, and I think I decided not to be because I didn't think they made enough money, right? But
That was a thing when we were growing up, right?
yeah,
You were a cop because you enjoyed some of the facets of it, but you really couldn't move much further in the economic scale, so you were going to
yeah,
stay
right.
there.
Right. You become a cop kind of for life, right? Unless you got
Hmm.
promoted.
Yeah,
Um,
you work hard and you get pension early, and
right,
I
right,
don't need a college degree for that, and I don't
right.
know if that's true anymore. You probably do need some sort of degree at this point, but when I was growing up, you could easily go out of high school into the academy, and that was typical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So maybe the answer is, if there is an answer for this one, maybe the answer is to equip police forces with different types of people, right? You've got your police force that when you hear the guy next door, yelling at his wife and you're worried that she's going to get hurt, you call that crew and you want them to come out and, settle things down. And they have to be people who are ready for battle because they don't know what they're walking into. But if you have someone who is a homeless guy who has mental illness, who's hanging out at the gas station, he's got on a pair of pants, no shoes, no socks, and no shirt, the cops get called for that guy too, right? But maybe in that case, you want to call someone who's a member of the force, or who's a social worker, or who has a background in social work, or something along those lines, because
Well,
that guy's not going to be violent, right?
see, there's personally my problem with this, and like, we're kind of straying away from tribalization, but I don't believe then that call should go to the police. I think the police should be there with serve and protect.
Yeah.
And if there's mental illness or social type of things that need to be addressed, that should be done by, as you indicated, someone who's more specialized in that
Right.
area. Like the police force now has detectives, they have beat cops, they have people that are specialized in there.
Right.
I just don't know if the mental health aspect of it should be under the umbrella of the police, burdening them with that, or that should be a completely separate entity that
Right.
is people who are mental illness professionals, social professionals that are called to deal with that. And if a police officer, from a protect and serve perspective, is needed as backup for that, then that's fine. But they're not leading that interaction.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I
I
think,
agree with that.
and I think at that level, you probably have a good likelihood of minimizing physical violence.
Right. Right. Yeah. You're
Not
probably
eliminating it, but minimizing it.
Yeah, you're probably right. I would agree with that. So your belief is that that police are their own tribe,
Yeah,
right?
they're definitely their own tribe. They might be in multiple tribes, but they are a bond onto themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that there's other, you could probably throw people that have the mentality or the position of EMT or firefighter also into that tribe, because they're looking to, in their core, help and
Yeah.
serve and protect and make sure that society is safe.
Yeah. Here's the one thing about that tribe that's probably different than the other tribes. It gets forgotten in all of this, that we pay for that tribe. Like we pay for that tribe to exist.
We
And I think
do.
as a society, I think everybody forgets that. I'm sure they forget it. I know we certainly forget it. But at the end of the day, your tax dollars, my tax dollars, everybody's tax dollars is paying those salaries. And so you can be in that tribe, but there still has to be I think some level of accountability. Back to the
Absolutely. There has to be guidelines, and there has to be accountability. And if you make people accountable on that end, I think you end up with a stronger tribe on that end
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we ran over on this episode. I hope everyone enjoyed this, and or at least is really angry, and one of the two. But at the very least, we hope we get you thinking. That's actually our objective on every episode. Not to really sway your opinion, but make you think about your opinion and maybe others. And so for Tribalization in America, this is Jim.
And I'm Argal.
All right. We will talk at you really next episode.
See you
Bye.
next time.